Welcome back. Now, the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund has gone cap in hand to ask investors for more funding. They're aiming to ramp up their coffers to deliver additional housing for South Africans. SAHIF CEO Rali led a delegation to the World Economic Forum last week in a quest to attract more investors. He joins us now live for more details. Thank you so much for your time, Rali. We do appreciate it. It's interesting that you've gone all the way to the World Economic Forum to get investors to understand the housing struggle and challenges that we face. Perhaps just start off with telling us why you decided to ask investors to assist and why you think the housing infrastructure challenge in this country is so important.
Yes, good evening and good evening to your viewers. Thanks for having us. I must just say, first of all, the background is that as South Africa, we're currently sitting at around 2 million housing shortfall, which in our view, it's a little bit of a crisis coming. And what we needed to do is just make sure that we can be able to speak to more investors. We have started already the work where we buy land, we service the land, we install all the services and make sure that we are able to deliver, because that's a hard part of construction and infrastructure. So we do that. So we thought it might just make sense for us. We were invited by House Africa to be able to speak to other investors in Davos. And we think that was a little bit of a success. And there's opportunities. We have the view, Heidi, that South Africans at this point in time needs a bit of hope. And we feel that housing and infrastructure can definitely be able to bring that hope, because we feel we're of the view that if we are able to do three things: one, get the land ready, unlock the value in terms of the land that is available, either from private sector or even the public sector. If we are able to unlock that piece of land, we are then able to make sure that we can be able to provide housing for people. One, two, we have invested in a business called Metro Fiber that does internet, and what we do, as we build these houses, we connect people with internet, because we don't want South Africans and Africans in general to be left behind in terms of internet. And lastly, we obviously are having a crisis in terms of energy in the country, where I think there's definitely going to be some school fees that we're going to pay, or we are currently paying, as we switch from one technology of providing energy in the country to the next one. And therefore, we've now started working with a business as a startup where we are doing solar into the same properties that we're providing.
Yes, so I think you've touched on important aspects. So it's about getting access to land to get these houses up. But the biggest challenge that we face in this country at the moment is electricity and access to electricity and reliable electricity. I'm sure that's also a big challenge. So it's one thing to build a house, but you need the water and you need the services that come with that. I'm sure that was also something that or maybe you can tell us if that's something that you are seeking funding for.
Yes, definitely. I mean, as a private sector, as I said, we've gone to go on a roadshow, and we're going to be doing that for the rest of the year around Europe and the US. But the main thing is that whenever we go and speak to investors, they're obviously asking us about the energy crisis that we are having. Mm-hmm. We have the view that in terms of innovation is going to become very key. So, for example, how we feel that the houses are going to be delivered quick is by obviously using innovative construction methods. And while you're doing that, you're making sure that people are connected with the internet so that they're not left behind. But lastly, when you come into your question of energy, we definitely have to find ways of using innovative ways again in terms of saying, how do we deal with energy? And part of technologies that we're talking to investors about that we want to bring to South Africa is definitely the solar system that is quite different and more reliable, and that can be able to be affordable. And while we're doing that, we're fundraising to make sure that we can also be able to give funding to people that are actually looking to put solar that is reliable in their homes, because that's quite expensive. So you will see that in the next few days, we'll be announcing some partnership that we're doing with some South African banks in terms of saying, how do we come up with innovative method of funding people in the private sector that are looking to buy houses, the people that cannot qualify for an RDP house, nor can they be able to buy a high-end property, but we call them the middle ground people who are really looking for home loans. So we want to also provide them with that in the financial services business that we are fundraising for. So I think technology, we've got no other way but to obviously move and make sure that we provide energy that is reliable and using new technologies.
So, Rali, I know you were at the World Economic Forum speaking to investors. I'm curious to know what they've said, if they've indicated an interest in investing and providing the necessary funding for this very important and critical aspect in providing adequate housing for South Africans.
I think the country and the world currently, we're sitting with the triple C's, which is basically the conflict, obviously the fight, the conflict in Ukraine. We're recovering from COVID, and lastly, obviously, the challenges of climate. So those triple C's are things that really are going to be coming and making sure they're here, but they're going to just make things worse in terms of how we're seeing the rest of the year coming up. So it's the people, our investors are quite keen to say, how do we help? How do we come up with innovative impact funding? So the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund is an impact investor. So what do? We are for profit, but we make a difference as we do these developments. So people are saying, look, they're quite keen. We have some MOUs that we've signed that will be announced very soon, fortunately, and that's great news for us because we want to bring hope to young people in South Africa where we can use infrastructure development as the private sector and housing to really bring housing job opportunities to young people who are sitting somewhere in a crate in the township. As you and I are going to work tomorrow, they're sitting in a crate looking for some opportunities. And we think as we build and we do this infrastructure development, one, they'll get work in the construction space. Secondly, as we build the external amenities, social amenities like clinics, hospitals, and shopping centers, young people can be able to get jobs. So investors are keen to come in and actually invest in an impact investment fund like ourselves. So we're quite excited to be looking at some nice opportunities or great opportunities for this year.
And just lastly, Rali, maybe just tell us about those that wish to benefit from this fund or those that wish to help with this fund. What are the timeframes that we're looking at and how can they reach out to help?
So, we're obviously a fund that is a private sector base. So we're not government, we're private sector. And we are obviously available on our website, which is www.sahif.co.za. And essentially, we're going to be on the roadshow and we're going to be reaching out to, obviously, outside investors and local investors in making sure that we can accelerate delivery of affordable housing in South Africa.
Great. Thank you so much for your time and we wish you all the best. I think it's a very important cause. That is Rali Mampeule, who's the CEO of SA Housing and Infrastructure Fund.